There was a hole in my barn that wasn't there yesterday, and by morning it had learned my name. The first time I heard it, I thought it was the wind, a faint rasping against the rafters, but the sound carried an intent I could not explain. It wasn't the whine of insects or the restless murmur of boards settling under age. It was something sharper, something that cut through the stillness of dawn and drew me toward the barn, as though I were tethered by an invisible rope. The day was already hot. The sun had risen with a merciless blaze, baking the earth into a crust that cracked under every step. My boots stirred dust, but the dust seemed reluctant to lift, as if even it were tired of moving. When I reached the barn door, my hand paused on the latch. I could feel a chill radiating from inside, unnatural in a season when even shadows burned. My breath caught. Some part of me wanted to turn back, but poverty teaches a man to ignore fear. There is always too much to be done. So I pushed the door open. The hinges groaned their usual complaint, but what lay beyond was not usual at all. Light filtered through the slats in long, trembling bars. Dust hung in those beams, not drifting down as it should, but hovering, as if reluctant to fall into what lay below. At first, I thought an animal had dug a burrow near the far wall. Rabbits or foxes sometimes tested the edges of the barn, but as I stepped closer, the shape revealed itself. It was no burrow. It was a circle, perfect and deliberate, a dark mouth gaping in the packed dirt. The edges were too smooth, as if cut by the careful hand of a craftsman. My stomach tightened. I knew every inch of that barn. I had mended its walls, patched its roof, swept its floor countless times. Yesterday the ground had been whole. Today, it was not. I crouched, my knees protesting after long years bent over fields, and peered into the hole. Darkness met me. Not the ordinary kind of darkness, the sort that promises light if you wait for your eyes to adjust. This was deeper, thicker, a black that swallowed the lantern glow in my memory. The sound I had heard before rose again, faint, almost like grain shifting in a sack. Then it shaped itself, delicate, hesitant, like a child repeating a word it has just learned. Fur, Nan, dew, my name. The whisper was neither male nor female, neither kind nor cruel. It was only certain. My blood turned cold despite the heat pressing in through the barn walls. I stumbled back, catching myself on a stall post. The wood felt warm, real, grounding. The hole pulsed in the corner of my vision, not with movement but with a strange weight, as though it knew I could not look away for long. I thought of my mother. She used to say the earth remembers us more than the sky does. The sky watches, she'd whisper, but the soil listens. As a child, I never understood. Standing there hearing my name echo from the mouth of the ground, I understood too well. My first instinct was to cover it, shovel dirt until the circle disappeared, bury it as though it had never been, but something in me resisted. The hole felt like a question, and burying a question does not erase it. It only grows heavier beneath the soil. I lingered, holding my breath, waiting. The whisper did not repeat. The silence pressed close, expectant. Outside, life carried on with its indifference. A crow called from the fence post. Somewhere far off, a cart rattled along the dry road. Yet in that barn, the world felt narrowed to one truth. The ground had opened, and it had spoken to me. I set down the lantern I had carried, though I had not lit it, and crouched again. I stretched out my hand, not to touch but to test the air. A breath of cold rose from the hole, brushing my skin, sharp as water from a mountain spring. It was wrong, impossibly wrong, but it filled me with a dread laced with wonder. I whispered back, almost without meaning to, "What are you?" The hole said nothing. The silence, however, was louder than any answer. I staggered to my feet, my heart pounding. Fear and curiosity wrestled inside me, neither strong enough to defeat the other. One thing I knew, this was no accident of nature, no trick of weather or animal. Something had chosen to open beneath my barn. Something had chosen me. And I, poor fool that I was, could not look away. My name is Fernando, and I was born into soil so poor it barely knew the taste of rain. The land where I live is not the kind that sings with abundance. It is the kind that tests the patience of every man who dares to plant it. The road that leads to my farm is hardly a road at all, more a scar across the earth, carved by the wheels of carts that broke long ago. In summer the ground cracks wide like lips begging for water, and in winter the wind sings hollow through the beams of my barn, carrying more sorrow than comfort. This is the place I call home. because calling it otherwise would mean I had nowhere at all. The house I live in is small, its roof patched with tin, its windows stubborn against the wind but never fully sealed. The boards creak at night as if they carry secrets of the generations who walked across them. My parents both died before their hair could gray, worn down by work that demanded more than a body could give. My father's hands were cracked leather, always holding tools too heavy for the hope inside him. My mother's hands were softer, but never idle, kneading bread when there was flour, stitching clothes when there was thread, and folding in prayer when there was neither. She used to tell me, "Fernando, humility is wealth that no thief can steal." I never truly understood those words until poverty became the only companion I could not lose. A poor man learns humility not because it is noble, but because pride is a luxury hunger will not permit. When the rain refused to fall and the crops curled like old paper, I did not curse the sky. I bent my back, I worked harder, and I whispered prayers to soil that gave nothing in return. Faith was all I had. Faith that one day the drought would break. Faith that the hens would not stop laying. Faith that my knees could keep bowing long after my body wanted to quit. Faith is not light in a poor man's life. It is the only fire that keeps the dark from swallowing him whole. I would kneel beside my small bed every night and whisper the same words my mother taught me. "Lord, give me strength to endure another day." And every morning, when the rooster crowed, I would rise. Not because life had grown easier, but because it had not yet killed me. The farm itself was a patch of stubborn earth, a few acres that could never decide if they loved me or hated me. The well coughed more than it poured. The fences sagged no matter how many nails I drove into them. The crops survived, not thrived. They bent beneath the sun like beggars before a cruel master. Yet I clung to that land as though it were an inheritance carved into my very bones. Because in truth, it was. My father's sweat had salted the soil. My mother's prayers had soaked it. To abandon it would be to abandon them. When work was thin, I would climb the hill to the farm of Señor Alves, a man whose wealth showed in the shine of his boots and the weight of his silver watch. He was not cruel, not generous either. Simply a man accustomed to being obeyed. He would pay me in coins that burned hot in my palm, because they carried the shame of being earned in another man's shadow. Still, I took them. Hunger has no pride. There were times when loneliness pressed harder than hunger. The nights stretched long and silence grew teeth. I found myself talking to the barn, to the rafters, to the old lantern by the door that had lit more of my life than any friend. Objects carried memory here. The spade beneath the porch still felt my father's grip. The rope by the well smelled faintly of hemp and sweat, reminding me of mornings when water came easier. In this way, I was never entirely alone. The drought had become more than a season. It was a way of life. Clouds passed above us but never stopped, as though ashamed to rain on such forsaken ground. The river had shrunk to a string of puddles, where thirsty cattle crowded, their ribs showing through skin stretched tight. Children in the village no longer played loudly. They moved slowly, conserving energy as carefully as bread. Even the flies buzzed less, as though hunger had worn them thin. I learned to make miracles out of crumbs. A single loaf of bread stretched across 3 days. A bucket of water measured not in thirst but in how many hours it could last. A single healthy crop felt like treasure, a whisper of grace in a barren season. Poverty is not simply the lack of things. It is the weight of time pressing down each moment, daring you to give up. And still I endured. I endured because I believed there was meaning even in the struggle. My mother used to say that the soil listens more than it speaks. When I buried seeds, she taught me to whisper over them, to tell them they were loved. She believed the earth remembered kindness. I carried that belief long after she was gone, speaking to the ground even when I knew it had no ears. So when the hole appeared, I did not see it as chance. My life had taught me that nothing arrives without purpose, whether gift or curse. For a poor man, even suffering feels like a message. Perhaps the hole was punishment, a reckoning for sins I had forgotten to confess. Or perhaps it was a doorway, a sign that all my prayers had been answered in a way I could not yet understand. The morning I first found it, I lingered on the threshold of the barn, my hand tight on the latch, and I felt the truth in my bones. The day had bent in a new direction. I could not name that direction yet, but I knew it was no longer mine alone. Something had entered my life, uninvited, unseen, and it had chosen to begin in the place I trusted most, the barn where every grain of hay and every nail held memory. I thought of Marta, my neighbor, the widow who carried sorrow with the strength of iron. She would have told me to salt the doorway, to pray harder, to bring the priest. But shame kept me silent. Poverty already made me small in the eyes of others. To admit that even my barn whispered against me would be to confess I had nothing left, not even sanity. So I kept my silence. I worked around the mystery, testing it in small ways, as a man might test a rope before trusting it with his weight. But in my heart I already knew. This was no ordinary season, no ordinary trial. Something had come for me, and whether it was miracle or doom I could not yet say. The second morning I stepped into the barn, the air greeted me with a chill that had no place in summer. The hole had changed. It was wider, almost twice the size of yesterday, its edges cleaner, smoother, as though a careful hand had polished the soil in the night. The ground around it was dry, yet there was no loose dirt scattered nearby, no sign of digging, no trail of disturbance. It had expanded without effort, without evidence, like a wound that opens wider while the body sleeps. I knelt, heart pounding, and watched. Dust swirled lazily in shafts of sunlight above, but whenever the tiny grains drifted too near, they bent their descent and slipped silently into the darkness. It was as if gravity had been rewritten around that circle. My skin prickled. The barn was mine, yet I no longer felt master there. Something unseen had claimed dominion. I tested it with a pebble, small and flat. I dropped it into the void, expecting a hollow thud, some measure of depth. Instead, there was nothing. The pebble vanished, soundless, as if swallowed by absence itself. I waited, holding my breath, counting to 30, then 50, then a full 100. Silence. The stone had been erased. That silence pressed against me, heavier than noise. And then, faint and trembling, I heard it again. The whisper. It rose from the hole like steam, curling into the rafters, brushing my ears though no wind stirred. My name. Not shouted, not spoken in command, but caressed, syllable by syllable. Nan, do. I staggered back. The hair on my arms stood rigid. The sound did not echo. It simply existed, present inside me as much as around me. My mother's voice flickered in my memory, her old warning, if you speak to the dark, make sure you mean it. My lips trembled, but no answer came. Fear held me still. That afternoon, I worked the brittle field with hands that shook more than the plow. Each groan of the oxen seemed to echo the whisper, dragging my name across the furrows. My thoughts ran restless. Perhaps the drought had unhinged me, bent my mind with hunger and heat. Perhaps grief, long buried, had found a new tongue in the earth. Yet when I returned to the barn near dusk, the hole waited unchanged, patient, certain. I lit my lantern and set it at the rim. Its glow stretched downward, but the darkness resisted, bending the light as though cupping it in a hand. Only a few inches were revealed, then nothing. Blackness so complete it seemed alive. I leaned closer, drawn by both dread and wonder, when footsteps creaked behind me. It was Marta. She stood in the doorway, a shawl pulled close against the evening air. In her arms she carried a basket of eggs wrapped in cloth. Her eyes, sharp from years of loss, scanned the barn and fixed on the hole. She froze. "What is that?" she whispered, voice tight. I scrambled for words. Something new. I found it 2 mornings ago. Her face paled. She crossed herself, clutching the basket tighter. "That is not of God. Cover it, Fernando. Cover it and pray until your knees break." I wanted to. I wanted to heap dirt upon it until the earth was whole again. But some stubborn truth inside me resisted. It spoke. I admitted. "It knows my name." Her eyes widened. "Then it is worse than I feared. Call the priest. Do not linger here alone." Shame kept me silent. A priest would laugh at a poor farmer with tales of whispering holes. Or worse, he would brand me cursed, and neighbors would keep their distance as if poverty itself were not already a plague. I shook my head. "No priest," I said softly. "Not yet." She pressed her lips thin, set the basket down with trembling hands, and placed a palm on my arm. "Do not let curiosity become your ruin. Whatever lives there wants you, not your land." Then she left, her shadow long against the fading sun. That night, sleep was no refuge. I dreamed the hole swelling, consuming the barn, swallowing field, house, and finally sky. My mother's voice floated through the dark, counting numbers to 10, but each number dissolved before reaching my ears. I woke drenched in sweat, the whisper still echoing in the chamber of my skull. The third morning brought worse. Senor Alves himself appeared at my gate on horseback. He reined in his animal and stared toward the barn with furrowed brow. "You've had visitors," he said. "What do you mean?" "Tracks," he replied. "By your gate. Not hoofprints, not boots either. Something dragging, heavy." I stiffened. "Maybe children playing." He shook his head. "Children do not walk in circles at night. Be careful, Fernando. The earth here remembers more than we do, and sometimes what it remembers should stay buried." With that, he spurred his horse and left, dust rising in his wake. I went to the gate. He had spoken true. Strange marks wound in loops and spirals, dragging lines like the trail of something pulled unwilling. They led toward the barn, then ended at the threshold. Beyond that point, the ground was smooth, as though the earth itself had erased the trail. When I entered again, the hole greeted me larger still. Its edges brushed the nearest stall. The lantern beside it flickered, though no wind moved. And from within rose a new sound. Not whisper, but something deeper, layered like many voices weaving into one. They did not form words, not at first, only rhythm. Then slowly, carefully, they shaped syllables. My name again, but clearer, stronger. Fernando. This time it did not ask. It declared. Terror clawed my chest, yet wonder twined with it. I felt chosen, as if the whole had singled me out from all the poor souls of this land. Chosen for what? I did not know. A gift? A curse? Perhaps both. I dropped to my knees, unable to resist, staring into the black that seemed endless. "What do you want?" I whispered. The reply came not in sound but sensation. A cold breath rose, curling around me, carrying the taste of damp stone, the scent of something older than time. My bones shook with the weight of it. And then, as if mocking my question, the whisper spoke back. "Stay." The barn quivered. The lantern light sputtered. I stumbled away, heart pounding. Whatever dwelled in that darkness was not content to watch. It was learning, growing, reaching, and for reasons I could not yet name, part of me feared not the command itself, but my own temptation to obey. By the fourth morning, the barn no longer smelled like hay or dust. It carried instead a damp, metallic tang, like the scent of rain-soaked iron, though no drop had fallen in weeks. When I opened the door, the air pressed against me with the heaviness of a cellar where secrets ferment. The hole had widened once more. Half the stall floor was gone, replaced by that perfect circle of nothingness. Its edges glowed faintly, not with light, but with a sheen of attention, as though the earth itself were staring back at me. I noticed something missing. My shovel. It had leaned against the wall the night before, its handle worn smooth by years of labor. Now it was gone. Panic swelled in my chest. I searched corners, rafters, even behind bales of brittle hay. Then I saw it, half buried in the hole. Its handle jutted upward like a grave marker, the blade already swallowed by darkness. I rushed forward, seized it, and pulled. The wood strained, groaned, then snapped free. The shovel's blade was no longer silvered by years of use. It was black, pitted, corroded, as though it had aged a century in one night. My breath faltered. Whatever lurked beneath had not just stolen my tool, it had stolen time. I staggered back, clutching the ruined shovel. The hole exhaled a breath colder than stone, brushing my face. The whisper rose again, now layered with tones too many to count. Some were high and childlike, others deep and grave, yet together they formed my name, repeated in endless echoes. Fernando, Fernando. It was no longer merely imitating, it was rehearsing, perfecting. By evening, Marta appeared again. She carried bread in her shawl and suspicion in her eyes. The moment she stepped inside, she froze, her face drained of color. "It has grown," she whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. She crossed herself, hands trembling. "This is not of God. It is hunger. It will not stop until it swallows all you love." Her words pierced me deeper than any blade. I wanted to confess the truth, that I felt bound to it, chained by both fear and fascination. Instead, I lowered my head. "What would you have me do?" "Seal it," she said, her voice firm despite her shaking. "Call the priest. Salt the threshold. Do not listen to it." But shame kept me silent again. To call the priest would be to invite laughter, condemnation, perhaps exile. The poor are not allowed madness. We are expected to endure quietly. I said nothing. She laid the bread on my table, squeezed my shoulder with a strength born of grief, and left. That night I decided to confront it alone. I lit 3 candles, setting them in a triangle around the hole. Their flames bent inward, as if leaning to listen. The whisper surged, weaving itself with the flicker, a language too old for ears. My heart pounded like a drum against the silence of the fields. I whispered into the circle, "What do you want?" The air thickened. The candles guttered. And then, with the weight of inevitability, the answer came, "Stay." The word struck me not as command, but as prophecy. I felt it in my marrow, in the rhythm of my pulse. The barn groaned. Boards trembled overhead. Dust sifted from the rafters. I clutched my chest, gasping. Then from the doorway came another voice. "What madness is this?" I turned. Senor Alves stood there, lantern in hand. His horse waited outside, stamping nervously. Alves's eyes, sharp from years of command, locked onto the hole. His face hardened. "I've seen this before," he muttered. I swallowed. "Where?" He stepped closer, his boots crunching hay. "In the mines. Long ago. Men dug for silver, deeper and deeper. But it wasn't silver they found. It was this." He gestured toward the hole with a trembling hand. Voices, whispers in the dark. Men went down singing, came up hollow. Some never came up at all. His words coiled around my fear like a serpent. "And what happened?" I asked. He shook his head. "The mine collapsed, buried under rock. But I tell you, Fernando, some things do not stay buried." Before I could press him further, he turned abruptly, leaving without another word. The hoofbeats of his horse faded into the night, leaving me alone with the hole and my terror. The candles sputtered, their flames dragged downward. One by one they died, as if consumed. The barn plunged into darkness, save for the faint, impossible glow from the circle. I lay awake in bed that night, trembling with every sound. Each creak of the house was a footstep. Each sigh of the wind was my name. I prayed until my lips cracked, but no prayer silenced the whisper. By dawn I knew what I had to do. If I did not face it, it would take more from me. Tools, time, perhaps even my soul. I tied a rope around my waist, fastening it to a beam. I lit my lantern and lowered myself into the hole. The air grew colder with each inch. Darkness wrapped around me like wet cloth. The whisper swelled, pressing against my ears until it became a roar of countless voices. I dangled there, heart pounding, eyes wide, and then I saw them. Shapes. They shifted below me, twisting, stretching, mouths opening and closing in silent cries. Faces without eyes, hands without fingers, bodies that looked half-born, half-forgotten. My lantern shook, the rope strained, the whisper resolved into a chorus. "Stay." A tug yanked at the rope, hard and sudden. My body lurched downward. Something unseen was pulling me, dragging me into the abyss. I clawed at the rope, scraping my palms raw, boots kicking against the dirt walls. The lantern slipped from my grasp, tumbling into the black. Its light dwindled, swallowed whole. I screamed, pulling with all my strength, and somehow, by grace or terror, I scrambled up, collapsing onto the barn floor. I lay there, chest heaving, rope cutting into my waist. The whisper mocked me, rising and falling like laughter. I knew then, the hole was no longer waiting. It was hunting, and I was already too close to being caught. By the 7th day, the barn was no longer mine. Half its floor had disappeared, devoured by that perfect circle of darkness. The animals refused to enter, not even the stubborn goat that once chewed through ropes just to spite me. The air smelled wrong, thick with iron and something older, like stone cracked open after centuries. Even the sunlight seemed hesitant at the doorway, as if refusing to step across a threshold that no longer belonged to this world. I stood at the edge with my lantern, hands trembling. "If you know me," I whispered, "then show yourself." The hole stirred. The whisper swelled, no longer the hesitant rasp of a learner, but the steady voice of something fully grown. The ground trembled beneath my boots. Dust fell from the rafters like ash. My lantern flickered, casting shadows that bent inward toward the abyss. And then from below, light emerged. It was pale, cold, the kind of light that does not warm but reveals. It spread like reversed dawn, rising out of the circle, painting the barn walls with silver. My chest tightened. This was no ordinary glow. It pulsed with intent, as if it were alive. Shapes formed within it. At first they were vague, fluid, like smoke trying to remember a body. Then they sharpened. Faces, eyes hollow but knowing, mouths opening and closing in silent repetition. My knees buckled, and I fell against the stall post for support. One face rose higher than the rest, clearer, stronger. My breath caught in my throat. It was my mother, Her features were as I remembered from childhood, the crease at her brow from years of worry, the tenderness in her eyes that even poverty could not dim. She reached upward, her hand pale as frost, and the whisper carried her voice, delicate yet certain. "Do not fear." Tears blurred my vision. My heart surged with longing so fierce it hurt. For one breath I felt her touch, cool against my cheek, impossibly real. Memories flooded me, her lullabies, her prayers whispered over seeds, her laughter when bread rose high in the oven. The hole was no longer just darkness, it had become a gate. But then, another figure rose beside her, harder, harsher, a man with a jaw like stone and eyes like judgment. I recognized him from stories. Portraits faded in the village church. Alves's father, dead long ago, his mouth twisted, words spilling from the whisper, sharp as blades. Every gift takes, every light demands shadow. The barn shook violently, boards snapped. My lantern tumbled, its flame sputtering, barely clinging to life. The rope I had tied days earlier, still anchored to the post, jerked taut, dragged toward the hole as if unseen hands pulled. The faces multiplied, crowding the circle, their mouths stretching wider. My mother's hand began to fade, her image trembling like smoke in wind. "No!" I cried, reaching for her. The whisper rose into a chorus, deafening though it carried no sound. 100 voices, 1,000 merging into one command. "Stay!" The floor cracked beneath me. Splinters of wood shot upward as the barn groaned under pressure. My body lurched forward, pulled by the gravity of the abyss. It wasn't just the earth dragging me. It was my own heart, desperate to follow her, to rest in the arms I had lost too soon. I balanced on the edge of surrender. If I leapt, I could be with her again, with all the lost, beyond hunger, beyond drought. A paradise whispered from the depths. But another thought cut through, sharp as a blade. What if it was not her? What if it was a mask? A lure spun from memory to bait my soul? The whisper pressed harder, drilling into my bones. "Stay, stay, stay." My knees buckled. My body swayed. The rope dug into my waist, straining as though begging me to resist. Then above the roar of silence, another voice shattered the air. "Fernando." It was Marta. She stood at the barn door, her shawl loose around her shoulders, her face fierce with terror and faith. "Do not go where the living cannot follow." Her cry broke the trance. My eyes tore from the glow, from my mother's fading hand. My breath came ragged, desperate. I stumbled backward, clutching the stall post, ripping myself away from the pull. The ground beneath me cracked open wider, boards snapping like brittle bones. The faces screamed in silence. My mother's image dissolved into mist. The glow pulsed once, violently, then collapsed inward. The hole roared, not with sound but with absence so vast it crushed me to the floor. My lantern fell, swallowed by the dark, and then as suddenly as it had come, it was gone. The barn stilled. Dust settled like weary snow. The hole had vanished, leaving only unbroken earth, flat and undisturbed as if nothing had ever been. My chest heaved. My palms bled from rope burns. My heart still beat with the echo of voices I could no longer hear. But the whisper lingered inside me, soft as breath against skin. "Stay." I collapsed onto my knees, clutching the dirt. Tears spilled freely. Was it salvation I had refused, or damnation? I could not know. All I knew was that something greater than me had chosen my barn, had chosen my name, and it had nearly claimed me. Behind me, Marta rushed forward, pulling me upright, her hands firm despite their tremble. "You cannot face this alone," she said, her voice steady though her eyes brimmed with fear. I tried to speak, but words failed. The only sound in my throat was a broken whisper, repeating the one word that still haunted me: "Stay." The barn no longer bore a hole, yet the memory of it would never fade. Something had reached for me, something older than the soil, stronger than time, and it had not finished its call. I could still feel the weight of my mother's hand, fading from mine. The barn stands silent now. Its floor, once torn open by darkness, is smooth again, as though no hand of shadow ever touched it. Neighbors pass by and see only wood and dust, a poor man's shelter leaning against the weight of years. But I know better. I know the soil remembers. I know the silence beneath my feet hides more than roots. Each morning I walk past the barn, tools heavy in my hands, and I hesitate. I tell myself the earth is whole, that nothing lingers, yet my heart waits for the whisper to return. Sometimes when the wind shifts just so, I almost hear it, soft, patient, promising. "Stay." It is not gone. It has only stepped aside, watching, waiting, learning. I do not tell Marta everything. She already suspects more than I admit. Her eyes search mine when she leaves bread at my table, and I see the questions she does not speak. Do you sleep? She asks, her voice gentle. I nod, though the truth is harsher. Sleep comes, but never freely. Each dream carries the barn, the light, the fading hand of my mother. I wake gasping. Rope burns tingling on my skin as if time itself still remembers the struggle. The land has not changed. The drought still gnaws. The fields yield little. The well groans, coughing up water in grudging drops. Poverty clings to me like dust, and still I endure. But my prayers are different now. I no longer beg for rain or bread. I pray for strength to carry the memory, for courage to stand at the edge of the unknown and still walk away, for faith, not in miracles that dazzle, but in the ordinary labor of another day survived. I think often of my mother's face. Was it truly her? Did I almost touch her? Or did the abyss wear her shape to lure me closer? I may never know. Yet even doubt carries a kind of gift. It forces me to live in humility, to accept that not all answers are meant for us. Perhaps faith itself is the courage to live with questions. Sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if I had obeyed? If I had leapt willingly into the glow, surrendering to its call? Would I have found peace among the voices, or only silence without end? Would I have joined the forgotten, another shadow rehearsing names for eternity? The thought chills me, yet it also steadies me. I chose life. I chose the weight of hunger, the ache of labor, the persistence of breath. That choice, however fragile, is mine. Marta's words echo whenever I falter. Do not go where the living cannot follow. Perhaps that is the truest wisdom of all. To remain here in a world of dust and sorrow is not weakness. It is fidelity. Fidelity to the living, to the sweat of our brows, to the hope that even cracked soil may one day bloom. And so I endure. I patch the roof. I mend the fence. I till the stubborn ground. Each act is a defiance, a declaration that I belong still to this side of the soil. Perhaps one day the whole will return. Perhaps it waits for the hour when my body weakens and my longing grows too heavy. If so, I pray I will have the courage again to resist, to cling to the world where toil and breath still matter. For I have learned this: poverty is not the deepest hunger. Loneliness is not the greatest wound. The truest danger is forgetting that life itself, hard, heavy, fleeting, is still a gift. The abyss offered me reunion, comfort, release. But life demands endurance, and in that endurance lies the proof of faith. The barn is quiet, yes, but silence is never empty. It holds echoes, memories, choices, and within me, the whisper remains, not as a master, but as a reminder that the living must live, the dead must wait, and between us lies a mystery no shovel can bury.